And muted again.
Okay, can you all hear me? There's someone?
Yes,
How's the screen look?
Yes, we hear you.
it looks
Good.
good.
We can see it.
Does it look good?
Yes, it looks
Yep.
good, Jim.
It's a
Okay,
moth.
so you're not seeing
So if
my
everybody
notes
can
on
mute
the side?
themselves, guys, everybody mute themselves. And
Okay, Donna, you're not seeing my notes along the side, right? Just the big picture?
just the big picture, correct.
Good, okay. Okay, should I get started?
Go ahead and get started. I'm turning it over to you, Jim. Welcome. So glad to
Okay.
have you here.
Thanks, Don, and thanks for inviting me. And sorry about this snafu. I've done a lot of these. I have no idea what that problem was. I've never had it, and it's probably my fault, but whatever. Off we go. Now it's night out at least, so this is a good time to start a program on nighttime photography. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I have a lot to say, so I'll move through it quickly. But this is something I've done a long time. I know one of my friends is on here, John Howard, and John and I have spent literally hundreds and hundreds of hours out after dark with our cameras trying to shoot images. And we've tried to get better about this, and I have, and hopefully I've been able to capture some nice images. So a lot of us, when we go out to shoot nighttime photography, star trails and astrophotography is a big one. And I enjoy that too. That's like its own whole talk though. That's very, very different. Night scenery is always fun. That's the view from Mount Adams, looking into downtown Cincinnati. And I like that sort of thing. That's definitely nocturnal photography. And fireworks are always a blast. That's red, white, and boom over downtown Columbus. So I like doing all these things with my camera, but that's not what I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm going to talk about critters, the animal world. Not the low-hanging fruit either, like that. I waged war against this guy at my backyard feeders, and that's where he is. But it's definitely nocturnal photography, but that's a pretty common subject. And we're going to talk about a lot of weird stuff that isn't nearly that common, that comes out, or at least is best found and photographed after dark, like salamanders. Now, as always, you know, frankly, for me, photography is very much secondary to what my primary interest is. And I started out as a kid with a deep interest in birds, that anastomosis into all sorts of other interests. And I became a botanist. And the upshot is I was into all this stuff long, long before I was really taking pictures of it. But now photography and photography gear is so good. It's just an outstanding way to share a picture that's worth 1,000 words with a lot of people. So I see it more as a means to an end for me to tell stories and really promote conservation, because ultimately that's what it's about for me. I would be truly a conservation photographer, and maybe more knowledgeable about natural history than I am about photography, but I try, and I'm always trying to learn. Anyway, this is my gear now. These are my two bodies. They're both full frame cameras. I prefer all the data that a full frame camera catches and the huge file sizes that come with it. And then just the image quality. I've had a lot of crop sensors, and I just don't see the quality quite there with those as I do with these cameras. Downside is they're a little more expensive, but they are wonderful. So that's a 5D Mark IV on the left, my workhorse, especially for birds, things like that. And then my new 6D Mark II, which I replaced another one with, and I really like this camera. And this will probably be my workhorse for much of what I'm going to show you, especially macro type stuff. I really like that articulating screen. It's one of the few full frames, maybe the only one that Canon has that feature. Now, in terms of lenses, this is by far and away the one I use the most for what I'm going to share tonight, nighttime work. And it's the 100mm macro Canon. This thing has been through the ringer. It's been with me for many, many years. Still goes strong, and I use it. I bet 90% of the photos in this talk tonight were taken with this thing, put it that way. Fantastic. Nikon's got a 105 that's just every bit as good. But occasionally I jump out of the box, and that's my 400 f2.8. And I do some work with it, depending on the subject, not nearly as much though. This would be for more distant things that are a little harder. The macro certainly wouldn't work for, like that. Southern flying squirrels. These two shots were made with that lens. Throwing flash out, of course. Flash is absolutely imperative to this sort of work, and I'm going to talk a little more about that in a minute. But that 400 millimeter lens allowed me to stay away from these squirrels like 20 feet or so, which they're pretty tame anyway, but 20 feet, I'm like, don't exist to them. I'm totally out of their sphere, and they run around and allow me to capture them doing things that squirrels do without being worried about me. One thing that's really, really important to me, at least, is I don't like to have to fiddle around with settings a lot. You know, I like to find the bulletproof zone, essentially, and just put my camera there. So when things happen really quick, I don't have to be fumbling. I do shoot in full manual, almost always in manual mode.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Flash at 16.
Someone else is talking. I'm not sure if it's at me or...
You did.
I would say if we have any questions, let's just put them in the chat or wait to the end. Anyway, these are my walk-around macro settings for nocturnal stuff. Low ISO, 1 to 200. You can read it yourself. F16 is key. I'm big on F16 for a lot of this. I don't really like shutting down any smaller in terms of aperture than that for a number of reasons. And then the fastest shutter speed I can use, which is the sync speed of your camera. On Canon bodies, mostly it's 1/200. Some Nikons go to 1/250, but just put it on the fastest speed that it'll shoot with a flash. And then set the flash to through the lens metering or TTL metering, so that flash talks to the camera. And I say mostly 90% of the time, you're going to get a really nice exposure without having to fiddle with things a lot. And you're just prepared for your finding your subject rather than worrying about your camera. But now flash is the huge thing. So ISO, shutter speed, and aperture, we all know that interplay. But when you get into this world of nighttime stuff, flash becomes every bit as important. And it's the fourth leg now of this four-legged stool. I use it virtually on everything. There are exceptions, almost always, but I put that in bold or caps almost, and I'll show you why in a minute. I do all this stuff handheld. Shooting off a tripod for everything I'm going to show you would be like almost never. And then the flash freezes motion, provides a nice lighting, obviously. And then when it's pitch black out, you have to have it basically. And then I usually put diffusers, little plastic or cloudy filters over my flashes to reduce the light and mute it a little and drop the harshness a little. I'll show you some pictures of that. Here's an exception though. Laura Hughes showed me this down on their property in Southeast Ohio last year, and it was so cool. It's called the luminescent pinellus, and it is a glowing mushroom. It bioluminesces, and you can see it with your naked eye. It is so cool. It's just faint green glow. But it was pitch black where we found this and made these images, and you can see my where I had to be with my camera to get it to glow like that. I've done nothing to this photo except crop it, really. That's what it looks like. It's amazing. But I had to go way out off the reservation of my normal settings to do this with 30 seconds, a high ISO camera, lens wide open at f2.8, and I obviously had to use a tripod here. But it was well worth it, and I hope to work with these again at some point, but that is very much the exception. Generally, the f16 fast flash settings are what we're talking about here mostly. Now, some people use all kinds of auxiliary light. Some people have decent luck with flashlights. So this is a mothing sheet. People are taking pictures, and you can see they have headlamps on their head. And sometimes people will use those or flashlights to put some light onto their subject and shoot it without a camera flash. It works okay, but it's definitely not the best way to do it. It's too imperfect in your lighting, and it's not uniform enough to do that. But it is a way you can do it in a pinch. Better yet, though, is to jump into the world of real flash. Now, if your camera has a flash, like the top left photo, that's cool. They can work okay. Not great in my world, at least, but okay. My two bodies have no built-in flashes, so it's off the table anyway for me. Next, going along would be the ring flash. Ring flashes I've never had much luck with. I don't personally care for the quality of lighting. It's a little too flat and sometimes harsh, but maybe I don't know what I'm doing. Other people seem to do just fine with them, but that's not what I use. I use the other two. The bottom picture is a speed light, and it mounts on the hot shoe, and that is worth its weight in gold. And I use that a lot, not as much as at night, but some at night. But my real go-to unit is the top right one. That's a twin light system. They make them for all cameras. This is the Canon version, and it is the best because it has two independent lights that mount on the front of the camera, and I can turn them independently any way I want. I can put light right exactly in front of the lens if I want to. And they have wonderful pre-lights. When I half tap the shutter, little glowing lights come on and help me find my subject. I don't need anyone's help, no one holding a flashlight, nothing. My flashes find it for me, pre-light it, and then I can make my shot. It's the best thing in the world I know of for nighttime photography work. I use it all the time. So whenever I'm doing macro, I almost always have these twin lights on and often use them even in broad daylight. That's what I'm doing here. It just shows the rig in hand, and the red arrow points to my subject on the baking hot July asphalt. In this case, people thought I was crazy. It was at a conference, but I saw this cool thing and I wanted to shoot it, and I used this system to do it. And that's the kind of stuff that'll get you. It was a big horsefly, and horseflies have the coolest eyes of any flies. And I wanted to get it, and the lights from the flash really help illuminate everything and pop the eyes and everything else. So that's the rig I'm using for virtually every shot in here, probably, or the vast majority at least. Now, enough about the technicalities of this stuff. This is way more important to me, and I always preface these photo talks. I don't give a lot of photo talks, but when I do, with that, because in my world, at least, of biological photography, it's way more important to know about nature. Anyone can learn to shoot pretty good images. It's really not that hard, at least on my level. It's not to do what I want to do, but learning about nature is never ending. There's so much out there, and this should become really apparent as we move through the talk. So what I want to do is just go look at some things, some real world things that I've shot, and some suggestions or tips and why they're cool, that sort of thing. And I think we'll start with something that's starting to become animated right now. You know, winter's loosening its grip and things are starting to thaw, and this brings the stampede of amphibians, including frogs and toads. So some of these are active during the day. You know, there's a big bullfrog, a baby muskrat photobombed me on that. So I switched to the baby muskrat, but you can see the big bullfrog in the background, broad daylight, they're out, they'll call in the day and all that. And a lot of frogs as well, so you can shoot them in the day. Same with toads. This is a big old American toad, which I would make one note on this photo, always try and get on your subject's level. So I had my ear on the wet, mucky soil for this one with my camera right down there to get on his level. But you can do this during the day. Toads will run around, that sort of thing. But the dynamic changes radically after nightfall. The toads will even sing during the day, but good luck approaching them. These amphibians during the day tend to be very wary, very hard to get up on close and work with. This all changes at night, and I'm not even sure exactly why, but they tend to ignore you. It's much easier to stuff your camera right in their face. They'll keep singing like this toad is, and largely ignore you, and you'll leave. He'll still be there doing his thing. So the nighttime dynamic is just way, way easier to work with these amphibians, and they tend to be a lot more active too, and singing and things like that. There's a good old spring peeper, see them all the time during the day. Good luck getting a shot like that during the day, though. They will sing during the day, obviously, but they won't let you near them. And if you do get near them, they clam up. At night, you can just work your way right up to them and shoot images like that. Ditto gray tree frogs, wonderful little frog, one of my favorite ones. And Easy to see in the vegetation during the day like that. But again, the magic's really at nighttime when they're just singing like crazy. They're easy to find. They're very, very simple to approach and walk right up on and get the money shot. To me, the money shot with these male frogs are when that throat is in full puff and they're making their sounds. Deafening, by the way, to be that close to that little frog, 1.5 inches long, the sounds they make. It's amazing. Well, the reports came in like crazy just in the last day or so with this thaw and then the rain that was for most of the state on top of it. And last night, a lot of amphibians were running, and this is where people go, vernal pools, temporary pools, usually in woods. And this is where the salamanders and other creatures congregate to breed in the tail end of winter, early spring. It's happening right now, so get ready. You go up to one of those ponds like I just showed you at night, if it's a good one, and it is amazing. You shine your flashlight into the water, and it's just awash with, roiling with life. Like fairy shrimp like that, which I took out temporarily and put in a thin little container to get that shot and then put them back in there. But lots of those, but amphibians are what the real attraction are. There's a beautiful wood frog with its little mask, its little dark mask posed on the all too often used moss near his little wetland, but they do look good on that. But if you go at night, the wood frogs are way, way easier to get up on like everything else. This is a pair, you can guess what they're doing, but technically it's called amplexus. So they're in an amplexus, male up on top, you know, quote, hugging the female. This is how little wood frogs are made. And they will just stay like that. And you can get right up, shoot them, do no harm. They'll still be there when you leave. It's great. Only at night will you get that. But the probably the most interesting thing about vernal pools in spring is the march of mole salamanders in the genus Ambystoma that make this exodus from subterranean haunts where they've spent virtually all year, and then just they're pulled like a magnet to these ponds, and they go there to mate. This is a weird one called a unisexual salamander. Not a very well understood thing. Most of them are females, and it's this hybrid complex that could involve 4 different species probably here in Ohio. And that's what one of those is from Logan County, Ohio. If you're really lucky, you'll run into one of these. Tiger salamanders, my favorite thing in the spring, I'm going to be doing this real soon with the next rain, is go to certain areas that have these and just cruise the rural roads, country roads. They look like Komodo dragons when you see one on the road. A big one can be 8 inches long, maybe even longer than that. It is really, really impressive. And they're on the move, going to these vernal pools to breed. But probably the most common mole salamander we have, but probably the most striking as well, is the good old spotted salamander like that. Some of the marches, the breeding marches to vernal pools of this species are truly staggering, really, really impressive. And when they get to the water, they form, they're called congresses. And this is just a multitude of spotted salamanders, all males coming first, all there to reproduce. The night that I was in this vernal pool, which was in central Ohio, there were inestimable thousands of these in there, just roiling the water, almost like fish in places. The little white specks that you see towards the center of up in the upper right-hand corner, those are spermatophores that the males, which these are, have already left. The females will come later and uptake the spermatophores and get fertilized that way. But it is truly one of nature's great spectacles. You will only see this at night. They don't do it during the day, not this frenzy like this. Well, those are the vertebrates, but what I really want to talk about are invertebrates, the big, big world without a backbone. There are infinitesimally more invertebrates out there than there are vertebrates. And they are some of the most interesting and often poorly known creatures there are, you know, the insect world and spiders, things like that. And nighttime is wonderful to work with these. In some cases, it's really the only time you can work with them. And an easy way to start this, if you want to, you know, wet your feet in nighttime photography of animals, can just be in your backyard. the singing insect symphony that starts picking up steam in late summer and then reaches a crescendo in fall. These are all the katydids and crickets and coneheads and all these things that sing for us. And they're very common in yards. Some of these photos I'm going to show you were taken in my backyard. But this is a sound, is just an age-old sound. Some people think the evolution of intentional sound was this group of insects, the Orthoptera, the fossil records of wings and file scrapers to make the sounds they make go back over 200 million years, I think. It's a long time. So this is a broad-winged tree cricket, very common in your yard, probably it's a male singing, and he holds his wings up over his back like fiddles and then rapidly rubs them together. One side of the wing at the base has a file, the other has a scraper, and as they ratchet over each other, it makes the beautiful, in this case, trill that we hear. And sometimes the collective trilling of tree crickets is the major part of the nighttime soundscape in your yard and everywhere you go where singing insects occur, which is virtually everywhere. Now, he's singing just like a bird sings for the same reason. He's going to attract a female. Here's a success. That's a male broadwing tree cricket with head to the right, female up on his back that he's called in with his enchanting little song. She is eating him, basically. He has a gland below the base of the wings that secretes a rich substance like sugary protein. She's very smitten with that, so she mounts onto him and starts eating that right off his back. And in the meantime, they couple and transfer sperm from him to her. It's really an amazing thing how all this works. That's why they're doing it. And boy, they hear well. And it is a weird way of hearing. This is a greater angle wing. If you've ever heard that metallic clicking sound in late summer and fall in your yard, that's what's doing it. This big, big katydid. It's one of our bigger species. But most of these animals have their ears on their knees. So I'm pointing to it with my arrow, that slit. And each knee, we'll call it, has an ear, and that gets the ears far apart from each other. They can triangulate on sounds very well. And the females just follow that male's sound and go right to them. That's how they meet each other. And when they sing, they often sing in the same manners as a bird, where often birds will get up on a perch. It's fairly conspicuous, like a robin, and deliver their song. Well, so do these. They just do it after dark, and you can't see them doing it, but you can get pretty good at finding them just by following their song. So here's a quicker round-winged katydid at the very tip of a small shrub in a woodland understory, and his song gets out farther, and the girls can hear him better and hopefully find him over there. And with a little practice, it's really easy to find them just like the girls do, and then make some interesting photos. It's a wonderful world, though, and most people that get an indoctrination into the world of singing insects after dark really become smitten, especially photographers, because these are very charismatic animals, very, very pretty animals, like this curved-tailed bush katydid on an old redbud leaf in fall. Very whimsical animals. This is one of the coneheads, the Nebraska conehead. I don't have to tell you how it got the name conehead. And we have about, 8 or 10 of these in Ohio. Most don't have the pleasing songs of the others. They sound like a Black & Decker buzzsaw run through a guitar amp, and ear-splittingly loud and piercing and painful almost if you're too close to them, but they're very cool insects and extremely photogenic. This was in my backyard. I told you I'd show you something. I just discovered this summer I have these in the yard in this very suburban place. Northern bush katydids, which only sing for a couple weeks, sort of late summer before most of them get going. And I was so pleased to have them here. And then, so I had to run one down, take the photo. Here's another really common one that you all have in your yards, the lesser anglewing. It sounds like amplified mariachis or whatever you call those castanets. That's it, castanets rattling. And this is a male here. You can tell by the brown patch up on his neck. That's where the rubbing area is that he makes some sound. And you might go, oh, just great coincidence, he happened to land on a trumpet creeper flower. Well, he didn't quite do that. They're really easy to work with. All you do is wet your finger, which gets it a little saltier, and hold it out to them very, very gently. They love the salt, and they will detect that and clamber right on board and start rasping the flesh off with their powerful little mandibles. But in the meantime, you can go, relocate them on a trumpet creeper flower or whatever you want. Really easy to work with these, generally speaking. Ear, remember, just a reminder, there's his ears. It's a male. Well, there's a lot to be discovered. This is another reason I really, really like nighttime photography, because there are probably more mysteries out there to be discovered and ferreted out at night than there are during the day, because far, far fewer people go out at night, like at least John and I do, into these remote places sometimes. And we're scared of the dark mostly. And people don't want to be out in dark forests. I'm going to talk about a safe way to do that here in a minute, but we do it a lot, and we find a lot of cool things. This is one I found last summer or fall in Delaware County. It was a county record. It's a beautiful little ruby-eyed katydid, the modest katydid. And this is a female. You can tell by that curved scimitar-like ovipositor sticking out of the back of her abdomen. But this is on the march, and no one really knows why. A number of these singing insect species are moving north fairly rapidly. And this is one. And here's yet another northern county. It used to be considered a very, very southern thing. And if you look at maps of them online, you'll see that central or northern Ohio is probably nowhere near where they're listed as being, but here they are. They're moving fast. They didn't used to be here. So we can use photography to document that sort of thing as well. Here's another really good, this is my favorite katydid, by the way. The name fits. The song is really subtle, hard to hear, but oh my God, it goes on for like 15 seconds and has all the flourishes of a symphony orchestra. Really amazing. We can only hear about half of it because the other half goes up beyond our hearing, but that's what this one is doing, sitting up high on a plant, and that's how I found it and photographed it. But I want to show you another more interesting one than that. This is an undescribed species. We don't know what it is. It hasn't been named to science yet. This came to light about 7 years ago, probably now. And I was leading a nighttime foray in Adams County in some backwoods. And we were mostly looking for caterpillars, but I heard this. And it sang in a place where I would never in a million years have thought the species that I just showed you would be. I knew it was a virtuoso katydid. So anyway, I wanted to find it because of this weird forest opening it was in, not in a big open meadow like they usually are. And there's the only shot I got. So this, as far as I know, is the first photograph ever taken of this as yet to be described species. But the main point I want to make here is to get back to those pretty bulletproof settings I shared with you. F16, ISO 100, 200th of a second with flash. And because my settings were pretty bulletproof, I got a decent photo of the thing. And the flash sometimes does spook them, not usually though, but after I made the shot, he jumped off the leaf, never to be seen again. Showed it to Will Hirschberger, who's a real expert on orthopterans, and that led to this whole chase, katydid chase, and they finally got specimens, sound recordings, DNA. It's not even close, as I understand it, to the related species, and I think will be described as a new species. Later, with a captured one, I was able to work with him a little in a white box, just a white interior box, and he's grooming. They're very cat-like. They are meticulous in their grooming, and he's running an antenna through his mouth, making sure it's all clean, so his senses are at their peak. So anyway, that was exciting. And many finds like that, I'm sure, sitting out there that no one even knows about yet. Spiders, I have to touch on them. This is one of the biggest groups of predators in Ohio, nearly 700 species. They are everywhere, and a lot of them are way more active at night. It's the best time, unequivocally, to find spiders, which a lot of you will not want to do. But if you go out at night, you got to work for them. So don't worry about it. You probably won't see them if you don't want to see them. But I don't know why you wouldn't want to see them. They're so cool. Here's a marble orb weaver hiding. This is why I don't see them during the day, at least some of them. So this is in the day, and he's hiding in a rolled up leaf, his bivouac, and he will remain there all day, or she in this case. And after night falls, when the magic starts, the animal comes out of hiding, like so many spiders do, and starts assembling its web. A lot of these build webs every night. They take them down by dawn and do it again. So they're really nocturnal creatures and hide incredibly well during the day. Good luck even seeing this. I don't know how my friend Chelsea even saw this thing. That's the old inflorescence or flowers of Joe Pye weed, long brown, and out of flower. And the spider was hiding in it. It's a big spider too. It's not small. That might help you orient to what you're looking at with the legs sticking down. It just hides in there in plain sight all day long, not doing anything. These spotted orb weavers make wonderful webs. They could be on your front porch, they're really all over the place and doing their thing at night. That's when you get the shots like that. So many others out there, though. This is just a stunningly beautiful. I can't even put this one into words. You have to see it. It's almost like it's lit from within, that beautiful suffusion of yellow and orange, a very, very striking spider. I've only seen them out at night, like so many of the orb weavers. And then spiders are just fun because they do things, really cool things. So we've all heard about, the poor male mating with the female and being eaten. That's what's going on here with this sac spider. Hopefully he left his progeny with her and then got eaten after that. But, they're always doing interesting things, killing things and whatnot, which makes it even more fun to shoot them. Back on that thing about nocturnal photography, helping document poorly known animals, here's a case of that. This was back in 2013, and John was on this trip, I know, John Howard, but a bunch of us were at a property in Adams County, and I saw this spider like a long ways off. It's giant. It's like palm size. It's a female, really big, one of the fishing spiders. I was like, wow, it didn't look like any fishing spider I'd ever seen. So I got over there. She was aggressive too. It's one of the nursery web spiders, and she had a bunch of young down below her in a tangled web under that leaf, and she was guarding them. So when I moved up real close, she came my way, like back off. But anyway, I got some nice photos, and it turned out to be this white-banded fishing spider, which at the time we thought was the first state record in Ohio. And then I found out someone else had found one earlier that same year, and that was the first record. But anyway, second record. And now there's been a lot more records. This is another species, for whatever reason, seems to be moving north from its southern haunts. And we were able to document it with photography. And finally, Laura Hughes, who I spent a lot of time out with, she is one of the greatest field people I've ever seen, bar none. But she found this I think it was 2019. And it's a bolus spider. They're a really interesting group. I'm going to show you why here in a second. But this was brand new to Ohio, a new state record of this fairly large spider. This is what it does when it's hiding. It looks like a knot of fungus on a tree limb. It just hangs there all day long. You're looking right into its face between its legs on the upper part of the body. And that's what it does. But bolus spiders come to life after dark, really gets interesting. This is my favorite spider by far, the toad-like bolus spider. I've only seen them twice, and they are so cool. After dark, the female hides in plain sight on a leaf during the day, looks like a bird dropping. But at night, the magic happens. She drops off the leaf, makes this little spindly silken trellis, and she hangs from it, just like she's doing there. But then she drops down a specialized silk line with a glue-like drop at the end. Then from her legs, apparently, the spider emits pheromones, pseudo-pheromones that exactly mirror those of a small group of moths. So the male moths are fooled. They think that spider is a female moth emitting pheromones. And then they flutter. They flutter, flutter, flutter closer, get in range, and she whips that out like a South American gaucho's bolus and sticks them with the drop and reels them in and eats them. Now, you just can't even make this up. And there it is. That's on my to-do list there is to actually get one of those in the act of killing a moth. Someday, maybe. Always got to have goals. Anyway, on we go. I want to end with this group of animals because they are so cool. So butterflies are beautiful. They get all the attention, like these spicebush swallowtails. Here, pollinating a native azalea, they're the only effective pollinators of those. And butterflies are important, very beautiful. We've had about 160 species in Ohio ever, counting all the rare things. Read the quote up above. It's fantastic from a University of Florida entomologist. Butterflies and moths are really the same thing, but we do subdivide them, and moths outnumber butterflies by scores. We think that there could be as many as 4,000 species of moths in Ohio. I think almost about 2,500 have been documented so far. It's legions beyond butterflies in terms of the numbers, but they come out at night, so they don't get near the attention of butterflies, and that's a shame. You've got to work, you've got to make special efforts to see moths well, and I'll talk about how we do that. But it's a world well worth exploring if you're a photographer, even if you don't like nature. I don't know how anyone couldn't like nature, but if you just want cool subjects that all your other buddies are not getting, here's the world you want to enter. This is one reason you don't see them during the day mostly. They hide so well, it is ridiculous. This is an angel moth on leaf litter, which is what they do during the day with their wings stuck straight up in the air. It looks just like a leaf fragment. You'd never in a million years notice that until it flew out from under your feet. Here's one that, good luck. I mean, it's filling the whole picture, but that's a tulip tree beauty moth, a big moth. It's on a trunk of a tree, which is what these things do during the day, as many other moths do, and you're not going to see that. Birds, theoretically, aren't going to even see that, as sharp-eyed as they are. So they're hiding out of sight and out of mind during the day, becoming active at night. Even things like this. You look at that, this looks like a Lepidopteran Teletubby. It's pink and yellow. You would think, how could a rosy maple moth hide on anything? It's pink and yellow. Very common moth, by the way. Well, when you see one hanging on fresh maple samaras, red maple samaras, then maybe the mystery is solved, you know, why it might be pink and yellow. Anyway, all kinds of camouflage in this world, and it's incredibly effective. Just go out at night and cut through the camouflage when they're out doing their things. So here's a good way to find moths. If a plant, flower, is good for butterflies, it's going to be a lot better for moths because there's way more. You just have to go out after dark and look at the same flowers. Milkweed is, you know, one of the most productive. There's the good old common milkweed on the left and the much rarer poke milkweed on the right. 13 species of milkweeds, by the way, in that genus Asclepius in Ohio. Any of them are good. So just go to milkweeds at night. You'll probably be stunned at what you see coming in to pollinate. Wonderful photo ops too. There's a flower, that poke milkweed I just showed you. These are Busk's plume moths. You would mistake these for mosquitoes in flight. That's how little they are. The moth world goes from almost invisible to huge. These are more towards the small invisible side, but they love milkweed flowers, and you can find them on it easily. But there's a lot more conspicuous, bigger things. This is one of the two tussock moths. You can't tell them apart, but they're very common. They love milkweed flowers and a lot of other flowers for that matter. Here's a bold feathered grass moth, one of our prettier moths. This one's a little old and tattered. Moths do not live long. They get tattered quickly. On milkweed flower, there's a little underwing on a milkweed flower, one of the myriad underwings out there with those showy underwings that are colored, often orange in this case. Same milkweed, just minutes later, this came in, spotted grass moth. It was just a constant procession of interesting moths just for this one plant. So this is a wonderful way to go out and work moths at night, is just go to these cool nectar plants. But it isn't just milkweeds. A really big group for this are the composites, the sunflower family members, that massive family. Virtually all of them are good. This is a master's dart on Joe Pye weed. Joe Pye weed, just like it's good for butterflies, is killer for moths after dark. The moth shift comes out. Here's a splendid palpita on bergamot, wild bergamot, mint. That's also a wonderful moth plant. All of them are wonderful. This is tall iron or tall bone set, one of our more common bone sets. And there's a yellow striped armyworm moth on that working it. A bunch of them were working this plant that night. This moth, by the way, is highly migratory, just like birds. Sometimes the numbers that pass over at night show up on radar, NEXRAD radar, weather radar. They're so numerous. Just it's a fascinating little world here. And finally, of that, who wouldn't want that in their yard? And this is a native plant called cloak root, but it was planted in a garden situation in this case where I made this photo. And one of our prettiest moths, the zebra conchilotes, they were coming into this. They were really attracted to this particular flower. I'm going to get some in my yard this year because I want to see if I can get this moth as well. So there's one way to find moths if you want to go out and try this anywhere. But a good way that a lot of people like is mothing with friends, because the dark woods, especially if you're out in really rural places where this tends to be the best, it's scary, you know. People are scared of the dark. Not if you're with a bunch of people. So go with friends. So I don't know, about 15 years ago, John Howard, myself, and some others, Marianne Barnett, started Mothapalooza. A lot of you have probably heard of that. It became probably the biggest moth show in anywhere that we know of. It's a weekend thing, and we would fill it up like in 3 days because it was just amazing how many people wanted to do these insane nocturnal trips starting at 9:30 or 10 at night and getting back at 2 or 3 in the morning. But they do, and that's what we did. And we did all kinds. That's your narrator with his van. I was the chauffeur on that one for that giant moth-eating bird wilderness adventure. So we do all kinds of cool things. Now, COVID's really put a crimp in that. But the Arc of Appalachia has agreed to take it over. It's a lot of work, and we hope to relaunch Mothapalooza in July 2022. Hopefully everything's settled by then. We can do it. Get in on that. Get in on that. If you're a photographer, you got to get in early because it fills up really quick generally. But oh my God, you're just going to get exposed to so much new stuff. It's crazy, and it'll be in Highland County, down by Hillsborough, that area. This is what we do. This is how you track moths, and you can do it safely. No moths die here. You know, they all get shaken off the sheet later and back out into the dark woods. But you just put up a white sheet or even just a white wall of something. The light in the middle is a mercury vapor light that's really expensive and really bright and really attracts moths. The tube on the left is a black light, essentially, and that frequency of light attracts a different crowd of moths. So you just pair those lights and you can see for yourself the action. I mean, it's just incredible the stuff that will come in if you're in a good habitat with lots of native plants. Native plants drive this show because that's what the caterpillars eat. They don't eat the non-native stuff, natives. So anyway, that's how we get them in. Well, once you got the moths in, not all of them, but a lot of them are really, really easy to work with. You know, once you know the little tricks, you can get them on your finger, then you can put them other places that look better than a white sheet, and then work your photography magic on them. There's a million ways to look at these things. There's a wall of fame we made in Adams County years ago where we just had so much stuff come in. We took 7 of the coolest and put them on the wall for mug shots there. It didn't last long, but we could do things like that. Really easy subjects to work with once you've got them in. This is from last summer. These Haploa clymene moths are so cool, and we had a blizzard of them. Got 3 of them to pose for me for a while. White sheet. I don't like shooting on white sheets. Sometimes you have to. If you do, you have to usually bump your flash intensity way up because it's going to want to expose for the sheet and leave your darker subjects darker. But that's easy to figure out too, and then you get nice shots like that. This is one of the Mothapalooza sites for 2022, 5 species of large sphinx moths. And we couldn't get all the species that were there in the same shot. It's really spectacular. There's 4 species of silk moths from top left, regal moth, a luna moth, imperial moth, and a tulip tree silk moth. And there were 3 other silk moths off to the side that would not cooperate with me and stay in my photo form. So anyway, really easy to work with these things, or many moths, when you set up an operation like this. But John Howard, I'm glad he's on here, because you really want to be mothing with John, because he takes setup to a high level. He brings a table out. He has these little twigs and leaves and all these things that you can put your moth on, if it allows you to, and then shoot them in more natural situations, like this Idaetes moth on a broken off twig. And then knowing moths, which is why Mothapalooza is good, because a lot of people know moths well. Well, if you know a little of their habits, you can work with them. That's an Io moth. It's a common silk moth, really cool looking like that even. But if you act the part of a bird and tap it inquisitively on the back of its neck, it instantly does that, and it makes for a much cooler shot. Those are pseudo eye spots that are thought to scare birds that might attack it, and all of a sudden, boom, they're confronted with 2 giant eyes. Io moths are really easy to work with, really easy to move around. This is one of the very few females I've ever seen on the right. So we had a lot of males. I bet I see, gosh, I don't even know, 100 males for every female. The females just must not come to lights, but when they did, I was able to pose them right together for a shot. Easy to do. Now, this is very cool, scarlet wing lichen moth, but good luck posing that. The rule with moths, the smaller and less hairy it is, the harder it is to work with. In other words, if you just stick your finger out to that, off it goes. You can't work with them like the big fuzzy guys. Ditto that. That's why I shot it on a sheet, because there's no way I'm going to move that and it'll just fly off. But that is a bizarre thing, a real oddity called a spun glass slug moth. All the slug moths are amazing looking. Then you enter the world of the micro moths, the really tiny things that might be measured in millimeters, but they often are even cooler than the bigger ones. And this is a 5 millimeter long striped oak webworm moth. It looks like it's doing push-ups with a little crest. Just photographic dream subjects through and through. This is a cool one. The tiger moths in general are awesome, but ruby tiger moths aren't very common. It's one of the very few I've ever seen. So of course I had to shoot it, but it's a close relative of one everyone knows. This is probably the most well-known moth, at least in Eastern North America, yet very few people would know it by that name, the Isabella tiger moth. This was taken last summer. This, by the way, space shots often work well with moths. But everyone would know it by its larvae, which is really unusual, the woolly bear. That was the adult of a woolly bear. Everyone knows the caterpillar. Hardly anyone knows what it becomes. Both very, very common, obviously. And that leads into the end here. And I just wanted to share a few photos of this because it's often a reverse ugly duckling tail where the larvae of moths and butterflies look often much, much cooler than the moths that they become. It's a reverse tail. And here's an example of that. This is a goldenrod specialist. They only eat goldenrods and asters, the brown-hooded owlet caterpillar. And owlets in the genus Peculia are stunning. They look like glazed pottery works, shiny. After dark, caterpillars almost to a fault emerge after dark. This is to avoid all those birds flying around during the day that would eat them and other predators. So we have lots of fun at night seeking out these beautiful and amazing larvae. Here's one of the other slug moths. I showed you an adult of one. This is the crowned slug moth caterpillar, and it looks like I don't know, like a sea anemone or something. It's hard to believe it's even real. It's really small, though. There's a lot of marks. This one isn't small. This shows how hard they work not to get eaten by birds. Double-tooth prominent caterpillars that's a moth caterpillar, and they're specialists on elms. And the back of the caterpillar with those serrations, those jagged serrations, mirror the look of an elm leaf serrations. They become one with the leaf, and they can be astonishingly hard to see, even though it's a big caterpillar and you're close to it. That's a holy grail for those of us that seek caterpillars. This one's really common, but it is so cool. White-dotted prominent caterpillars eat mostly oaks. They do eat other things, but oaks is like the biggest plant. And they're the consummate snake mimic. And a lot of birds are intimidated of snake-like creatures. So if this is pushed by a chickadee or whatever, and it's a fairly big caterpillar, it will coil up like a snake, bare its mandibles together. Those are not eyes at all, just colored mandibles, and it looks like a spooky snake looking over the coil. And you can do this when you see one just by tapping it oftentimes and incite it to curl up like that for your photos. Barrel laughs, never run dry here. That beautiful butterfly I showed you on those pink azaleas earlier on, this is its caterpillar, one of the amazing caterpillars of all time. It's a tree snake mimic, to be sure. And those are fake eyes. The real eyes are called ocelli, and they're down on the front. You wouldn't even be able to see them. But these big fake pigment patches really look like a snake, and visual deterrent for would-be birds that might eat that, perhaps. And then finally, of the caterpillars, the one of the true beauties. It's a specialist. It's a moth. A moth looks pretty cool, but not as cool as this thing does. And they only eat honey locusts. That's it. So that sort of being wedded to a single plant or genus of plants is very, very common in this world. This is why it's so important to protect native flora, because so many of our organisms that are so important have co-evolved with these plants, and the chemical composition of them, they can't eat other stuff. So here's a great case in point of something really, really cool that only eats one plant. Fortunately, a common plant, but that's not always the case. So if you want to learn a little more about caterpillars, and that's its own talk, join the Ohio Botanical Symposium. It's on March 26th. It's another Zoom meeting. Hopefully we won't have any issues. I'm one of the speakers, and I'm talking about caterpillars there and their connection to plants, why the two are, how they interface, and why it's also important to our birds and things like that. That sold up in a few days, but somehow they got the Zoom limit lifted to 3,000 people, which is awesome. And I'm sure there's space still. I don't think they'll get 3,000, but who knows? So just Google Ohio Botanical Symposium, and it'll take you right to what you need to know to register for that. We would love to have you. All right. Thank you. That's it. And thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jim, very, very, very much. I don't know, does anybody have some questions? Somebody did write, Jim, just so that I don't forget to ask this. They want to make sure, how can they subscribe to your blog?
Just go to the blog, and if you're interested in seeing it and you don't know about it, just Google my name, Jim McCormac. It's probably the first thing that will come up. And then on the top right, there's a button or something that you just press that to subscribe, and then you give it your email, and you're good to go. Then it'll notify you whenever I make a new post, which is usually about twice a week.
Cool. How about questions, guys? Anybody have any questions for Jim? Or
I have a question. This is supposed to be a year of cicadas. And 5 years ago, I worked the Memorial Golf Tournament, and we had cicadas there. What's the issue with cicadas? And, it's supposed to be 17 years, but can you enlighten us a little bit more on cicadas?
Yeah, we are in for Brood X, Brood 10, Brood X is coming up, and it's only going to be in Southwest Ohio. Cincinnati would be a center, but it'll get out to Adams County and several counties around that. Most broods of cicadas are 17 years. Every 17 years they emerge. The rest of the time is spent under the ground eating tree roots as nymphs. There's 13-year broods though, and now some evidence is suggesting there's broods that come out in even shorter intervals than that. There's a lot to be learned about this still. But the 17-year ones are the ones everyone knows. I remember the Memorial Tournament. I don't think it was only 5 years ago, but I think it was the last 17-year emergence. And it was driving those golfers crazy because these big bugs would land on them when they're ready to make a putt and everyone's quiet or drive the ball. It was fantastic. I loved it. This is one of nature's best phenomena, natural phenomena. It's a totally good thing. One thing the birders here will notice too, if you go into these areas like Southwest Ohio, is the sheer number of cuckoos and other birds that are just converging on these cicada emergences to eat them. Mississippi kites are records of that beautiful little raptor go way up in these cicada areas because they're feeding so heavily on them. But anyway, that's your question. 17 and 13 years are the normal intervals for those.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Jim, this is
Jim-
probably a really, really incredibly stupid question. But you know, I keep wondering about flash, and I've used flash at night, that type of thing too. Does the flash bother the animals, like the bugs and whatever you're shooting? I know that's probably a stupid question, but I keep thinking
Oh, no.
like these big eyes, you know, with all these things and this bright flash going off in their face.
No, it's a good question. There's a reason there were no owls in that talk, put it that way. I'm not flashing owls generally in their face because I worry about them. The bugs, I got to admit, and even amphibians, no, I don't worry about it. I don't think it has any lasting effect on them at all. One great thing about macro photography, even with flash, once you're used to it, is it's not like we're popping a ton of shots either. Usually 1 or 2 shots. Seasoned people, at least, you know you've got what you want, and that's that. And I imagine the eyes recover fairly quick, or at least it seems to. And I don't think there's any lasting impacts. Owls, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't go popping owls in the face with flash at night if they ever let you do that.
Okay, thank you.
There were 2 questions in the chat. One is, what is the status of your next book release date? And the other question was, do you process your own photos?
Good questions. The next book is on moths. I have a co-author. Her name is Chelsea Gottfried. It's out for peer review right now. It's through an academic press, Ohio University Press, and it's called Gardening for Moths. Insofar as we know, it's unique to this country. The Brits have done a couple like that, tending to be ahead of us on these things. But it's going to be a lot of what I showed you in that moth section. Here's what you plant. Here's what you get. Here's how you can create an ecosystem for these fascinating creatures. So we hope that's out maybe by the end of the year, actually on the shelves. And then the other one that is going to be out probably around that same time is Dragonflies and Damselflies of Ohio. I have 2 co-authors on that, and that's sort of working its way through the process right now. But thanks for asking. And yes, I do process my own photos. I use Photoshop, and I'm not very good. There are people on here that I've seen who have forgotten more about Photoshop than I've ever known. Good thing for a rube like me with that is, in general, these creatures, I don't want to do a lot to them. I want them to look just like they really look. So I'm not doing a lot of sophisticated stuff. But yeah, I use Photoshop, and that's what everything in there was processed with.
Jim, I have a question about Mothapalooza. The email list of people who were signed up for the old ones, has that transferred to Highlands Nature Sanctuary? Will former attendees get notice of this?
I don't know. I hope so. Yeah.
Is that a
it turns
Mary
out
Ann question?
Yeah, but I can find out. I talked to Nancy Stranahan, who runs the Ark of Appalachia, fairly often. I'll try and remember to ask her that, Monica, because you should be there. You've been at other ones. So,
Oh my gosh, I only missed the one, and that was because I didn't know it existed.
you could
So,
tell everyone how good that is for photos.
oh my gosh.
Cool.
Oh, it's like the high point of my year. Oh my goodness. I love it. I missed
Yeah.
it.
So
I missed
I'll try and find the answer out for that. I know I
Okay.
still owe you an email on something, so maybe. In
Oh,
that I
no
can also-
urgency. I'm sure you get pounded with emails, you know, so, but just wanted to email you and try to make some plans for this year, because we've all been suffering COVID restrictions, you know, and trying to make
Yeah.
up for lost time maybe this year a little bit. Thank you very
Sure.
much, though.
Thanks.
Jim, I have a question. Do you ever use, like, in addition to a macro, any attachments or extension tubes? I've seen those super close-up macros. They're almost like microscopes. Do you ever use any of those type of techniques, or?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. That's a good question. I'm taking it everyone here is these questions just fine too. But I do, and I actually was remiss. I should have put a slide in about those here. Probably few, if any, of the shots in this talk I did do that. But yes, I use a 25 millimeter extension tube fairly often, sometimes a 12. Those are the two I use and have. And when like really small micro moths, yeah, I definitely use those, and I love them. It's a really nice way to get closer. And then for those of you in the Canon world, at least, Canon's the only one that makes anything like this I know of, but I also have their MPE 65 millimeter lens, which is a microscope that you clip to your camera. It is stunning. It's incredibly hard to use. If you read the Amazon reviews on it, they trash it because everyone thinks you can just go out and point it around, shoot with it. You can't do it. You have to use flash. You have to use those twin lights that I have. It's the only flash it'll work with, and there's no focus. You just move the camera. That's how razor thin the depth of field is. Incredibly hard to use until you get used to it. But then you can shoot grains of sand, almost full frame size with that. It's really amazing.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Anything else?
I have a question in the chat. Autofocus or manual?
Auto. That's a good question too. I should mention that too, and I forget to. But I am a total autofocus guy and almost never go to manual. I probably use more manual focus on landscapes than I do anything else because I like the auditory feedback of the beat. And I find even on these tiny subjects that the autofocus is just darn good. I mean, there are some macro subjects I don't like what it's doing and then I'll override it with manual, but very rarely. So yeah, I'd say 8% autofocus.
Is that what the extra lights on the twin lights do? Provide the autofocus illumination you need, or?
Oh yeah, exactly. So yes, with nighttime stuff, finding autofocus can be really hard if you're not properly lit. But when you have those twin lights or anything with a flash with a pre-light on it where you have to tap the shutter and get a glow out in front, it's really easy to acquire autofocus.
Yeah.
I have another question, Jim. I just thought of, I've never done this and just read briefly about it. Some macro photographers use some kind of stacking technique, and I think some cameras actually have it built in now where you can, instead of just getting the face and then the bokeh blurs out the back half of the body and all that, you can stack photos to get the whole thing in sharp focus.
Yeah, that's very true. And I'm sure there's probably people in here who dabble with that. I never have, to be honest. I've never used it, focus stacking. And I'm mixed on the results when I see them. A lot of times they look cool, but that's not what my eye sees. They're almost unnaturally in focus. And it's not a look I always like when I see it. So I guess I've just not been that interested in exploring it. One reason I virtually always shoot at f/16, sometimes even smaller, is to give myself some depth of field. And sometimes I'll just back away a little. That provides more depth. But I don't know anything about the focus stacking in terms of personal use, and have mixed feelings on whether I like those results or not.
Okay.
All right. Wonderful. Jim, thank you so much. As always, great presentation. So wonderful to have you here. And we had a full house tonight, totally. So I'm so glad that all of you who came and enjoyed the presentation. Be sure to sign up for our newsletter list so you can see what's going on at Westbridge. Don't forget, our meetings are open to everybody. So it was really wonderful to see everyone. Or not
Donna,
to see everyone. I see
Donna, I
names.
have a question before we sign off.
Yeah.
Let's see, the next competition is on what date? Let's see.
2 weeks from tonight. Mhm.
And when do you have to upload the photos by a week?
Photos are always the Monday, midnight, the Monday before. So that will be a week from today at midnight. And it's an open competition. There's no theme this time. And Sharon,
Okay.
you're here. You can correct me if I'm wrong. She didn't correct me, so I'm
You're correct.
there you go.
Thank you again
was-
very much, Jim. We had like 95 people on tonight, so you really drew a crowd as usual. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
Roberta got it. And very sorry, because I'm sure that problem at the beginning was operator error somehow on my part. I got another of these coming up. I got to figure that out because I don't know what I did. I'm sure it wasn't you though. It was me somehow.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
but it
just
worked out.
do a practice run with your next one.
Yeah.
Figure out, I'm sure you're right. It's probably just some glitch somewhere, but thank you. It was wonderful. Really educational.
All right.
Great
Thanks
pictures
so
as
much,
always.
everybody. Good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
All right, good night.
Bye. Yeah.
Good night, folks. Thanks.
Much.
Night.
Enjoyed it.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Bye.
Do you feel like John Boy here? Like
Yeah. Forget the rest of their names.